With us right now, sitting across from me, is AB Searight. She's with the Center for Strategic and International Studies. She focuses on Southeast Asia. Welcome to Manila.
Thank you, Maria.
You were here for ASEAN 50 for this event. What are you seeing with ASEAN at its 50th year?
Well, there's been a lot of celebration this year, a lot of different meetings and conferences, and ASEAN really is at a crossroads. It's celebrating its 50th birthday. It's a time to kind of look at a lot of its achievements, which have been remarkable. It's set up regional architecture that convenes the region, but at the same time, it's clearly become difficult for ASEAN to resolve the consensus issues. It operates on a unanimity rule, and what used to work in terms of countries coming together to forge a consensus has now become a situation where one country can block ASEAN from doing anything productive. And so I think there's a real interesting debate going on right now within ASEAN and among ASEAN watchers and ASEAN friends about whether ASEAN centrality can survive without ASEAN unity.
And one of the key issues that ASEAN is dealing with is the South China Sea or the West Philippine Sea.
Right.
How do you see this playing out in our new age?
Well, recent trends have not been terribly encouraging when it comes to ASEAN because ASEAN has been very divided. China has put a lot of pressure on Cambodia and Laos in particular to block any consensus to give ASEAN a voice on the issue, and so ASEAN has sort of pulled back, and we've seen that happen this year under the Philippines chairmanship. So after this incredible victory that the Philippines won in the Arbitral Tribunal Court a year ago, rather than rallying around that, ASEAN has sort of backed away and not really made international law in terms of this ruling the basis for resolving disputes with each other and with China. And so now there's talk, and I think next week we'll see these meetings, we'll see a ratifying of a framework for a code of conduct. The code of conduct has been under discussion for over 20 years, and China has been dragging its feet. Now it looks like there's some movement towards some agreement, but there's debate over whether it will be binding or not, and debate over the content. And a code of conduct that is not binding is really meaningless.
And the impact of the Philippines, in a year we've changed. You were here negotiating EDCA, and then now we're coming in with President Duterte shifting from an alliance primarily with the United States to China and Russia. And we've seen the reaction globally, but how does this impact something like the West Philippine Sea?
Well, first, President Duterte's rhetoric has been very interesting, and he certainly has talked about separating from the United States and growing much closer to China and Russia. But on the ground, the U.S.-Philippine alliance remains very strong, and we're still doing a lot of mill-to-mill activities together. But it certainly affects developments in the South China Sea when the Philippines does not seem interested in working together to send deterrent signals and build up capabilities that would be able to that would better put the alliance in a better situation in terms of pushing back on China. So, for example, when President Duterte said that he no longer wanted to do joint patrols in the South China Sea, that really has an impact.
President Duterte, like President Trump in the United States, again, the shift through the years. Let's look at the impact of that, of the leadership of President Duterte on relations with the United States. What does it look like from Washington?
Well, President Duterte is a very colorful character, so there's a lot of interest in him and his statements and trying to figure out what he wants to do strategically. There's a lot of interest in his interactions so far with President Trump. They're very similar characters in many ways, and they seem to have had a few warm discussions, and President Trump obviously has invited him to the White House and will be coming here in November, so a lot of speculation about how that is going to go. And of course, there's real concern about the human rights issues regarding the drug war. And so there's been a lot of attention focused on that in Washington. Now there's new attention focused on the Philippines in terms of the Marawi situation and real concern about terrorism in the Philippines and the possibility that Marawi could serve as a magnet for aspiring jihadists all over the region. So there's a lot of focus on the Philippines and a lot of questions about our relationship with the Philippines and where the Philippines is headed.
What do you deem the greatest security threat right now that we're facing in the region?
Well, the South China Sea remains a big issue because the way that's resolved ultimately is going to have a really big impact on the regional order, on whether there's going to be a rules-based system, whether norms and certain kinds of expectations of behavior will remain in place that will provide the basis for free commerce and the regional architecture that's already in place, whether smaller countries and middle powers will have influence or not. So I think that is the most important strategic issue. But in the near term, I think the issue, the concern about terrorism is very strong.
How would you gauge cooperation between the nations now? I mean, certainly the first time around with Al-Qaeda-linked groups and Jemaah Islamiyah, the countries were not cooperating as closely. This time around, how? Intelligence sharing?
Yeah, I think that there is a fair amount of intelligence sharing, and including with the United States, and then countries here sharing intelligence with each other. We saw the launch of coordinated maritime patrols in the Sulu Sea between the Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia. That's a very positive step, although I think there's a lot more that could be done, and a lot of the details in terms of how they plan to continue these maritime patrols, whether they're going to do combined air patrols or other kinds of activities. A lot of those details remain sketchy, but it's a very positive step.
I'll go back to the two presidents because APEC will be interesting.
East Asia Summit.
East Asia Summit, President Duterte actually called President Obama names
yes.
at a certain point. And he likes President Trump, and President Trump likes President Duterte. We've also seen that despite the pressure from the United States in terms of human rights, President Duterte seems to have gotten a free pass from President Trump, according to their last conversation. What's your reaction to this?
Well, it's not surprising because they have a lot of similar characteristics. They're both very plain-spoken politicians that like to shred norms and talk directly to the people, including through social media. There's a striking number of resemblances. So the idea that they would sort of admire each other and get along well is not surprising. It'll be very interesting to see how they actually interact when they meet in person. But I think it is a real concern if the president does not at all raise human rights and the importance of rule of law in dealing with things like the drug war. I think those issues are being raised in government meetings at other levels. Secretary Tillerson, of course, will be coming here tomorrow and meeting with President Duterte and other counterparts. And the State Department has already said that they expect him to talk about the whole bilateral relationship, which will include human rights.
And then my last question really is about President Trump and how the global balance of power has shifted, what role he's playing in all of this, and how you would describe this to them.
Well, by having this America First platform that he's the way he's defining his foreign policy priorities, and pulling out of multilateral commitments like the Paris Climate Accord, pulling out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, this trade deal that would have really cemented American leadership on the economic front in the region. All of these have raised real uncertainty, strategic uncertainty in this region and really globally. So, the United States used to be a real stabilizing presence and a stabilizing force. And President Trump has brought this new dimension of uncertainty about what kind of role the United States is going to play. And if the United States is not there as a real leader, who will step into the vacuum, or what kind of order will emerge? So that's a challenge. I think it's a challenge for everyone in the region. It's a challenge for this administration that I believe does want to focus to some degree on Asia and Southeast Asia. It's a challenge for them to demonstrate their resolve and commitment to stay here when the rhetoric at the top has been so problematic.
I I got to ask you more questions. I mean, is China stepping up into that factor?
It does. It does appear so. I don't think China is ready to step up to be a true leader of the region or globally yet. But China is taking a number of bold initiatives and really defining the aspirations of the region right now. You know, by launching the AIIB, the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, and now the One Belt, One Road initiative. China is painting a vision for the region, whereas the American vision that was encapsulated in the Trans-Pacific Partnership and other, you know, rules-based system, that is really fraying or sort of disappearing. So it is, the trends are not looking favorable right now.
And Russia. I mean, there's a whole intelligence investigation going on in the United States. What is Russia doing? Where do you see it headed?
Well, we'll have to see how the investigation plays out. It looks like it's heating up a little bit, and we'll have to see where it goes. But it has been very odd to watch the president so reluctant to criticize Russia, criticize President Putin, when there's clear evidence, and the intelligence community in the United States is completely unanimous, that Russia tried to interfere in our elections, which is a very serious thing. And Congress passed legislation to make sure that sanctions stay in place, and President Trump blamed the bad relationship we have with Russia on Congress rather than on Vladimir Putin. So it's very strange to see this unfold.
And we'll end back in the Philippines. I mean, President Duterte's supporters will say that essentially he did the right thing. He kept the relationship with the United States, but has brought in a renewed relationship with China. That, of course, has repercussions in the region now. So what are the dangers and the opportunities here for Filipinos?
Well, there is an opportunity, if skillfully done, to engage China and try to resolve manage some of the conflicts and ultimately resolve them. That is an opportunity, and so taking a fresh approach may make some sense. However, I think it is a mistake to talk about separation from the United States, to disregard the ruling of the arbitral tribunal, which is now customary international law. When you deal with China, you want to deal with China from a position of strength. And it seems like there's been a lot of unilateral disarmament by the side of the Philippines. And so I think that's unfortunate.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Maria.
We've been speaking with Amy Searight. She's the Senior Advisor and Director for Southeast Asia of CSIS. She's here for ASEAN 50, and we're going to keep track of this as it goes on. Thanks, I'm Maria Ressa.